A predator was already inside. Kansas City, Missouri, July 25th, 1989. While global headlines focused on a fracturing Berlin Wall, 16-year-old Fawn Marie Cox manned a register at Worlds of Fun amusement park, her mind miles away on ordinary teenage ambitions. She spent the entire season hoarding her hard-earned gratuities, stashing away every single buck to purchase a vehicle before her final high school year. It meant absolute independence and a promising horizon. She never suspected her life would violently end in under 12 hours. The teenager resided on East 9th Street along Van Brunt Boulevard with her parents, John and Beverly, alongside younger siblings Amber and Felisa. She played the role of the dependable oldest child, constantly stepping up to mother her little sisters, pulling grueling work shifts without a single gripe, enjoying weekend roller skating trips, and faithfully attending Sunday services. Donna McGee, her closest confidant, resided right across the roadway, and they burned through warm evenings whispering about crushes, classroom gossip, and pointless teenage trivialities. The till rang out. Yet another group purchased passes. The teenager offered a warm grin, tallied the coins, and passed back their receipts. She remained blissfully unaware that her impending executioner was a trusted insider, a familiar face who had shared meals in her very own dining room, a phantom who memorized exactly which glass pane to breach, and for 31 agonizing years, this monster would walk totally free. To truly grasp the nightmare of that evening, you must realize a horrifying truth about their residence. Security there was nothing but a dangerous mirage. Their two-story property rested dangerously close to the 9th Street Dogs, a violent neighborhood syndicate infamous for brutal break-ins. John and Beverly had completely repurposed their main eating space into a ground-floor sleeping area just to provide the girls with extra privacy above. Fawn claimed a solitary space directly opposite Amber and Felisa's shared quarters. Their shared washroom featured ancient paper-thin walls that echoed every single sound. But one fatal flaw left them utterly exposed. They practically never secured the window latches. Several seasons prior, the household had inadvertently bolted themselves outside. Amber, fiercely brave and athletic, had scaled the exterior siding right into her older sister's upper bedroom to grant them entry. From that moment on, it turned into an unspoken rule. Leave the glass unlatched during hot months for airflow, allowing quick access, and letting evening drafts combat the stifling upper-level temperatures. It seemed completely logical and totally harmless. In reality, it acted as a welcoming beacon for a predator intimately familiar with their layout. Out in the side passage, the father's vivid orange refuse rig rested securely under the teenager's second-story ledge. It sat parked there so perpetually that it essentially blended into the background. Tragically, that heavy machinery would serve as the murderer's personal staircase. Midnight shifted July 25th into the 26th, 1989. Approaching 11 o'clock, the mother and youngest sibling drove out to retrieve the teenager from work. She collapsed into the rear upholstery, utterly drained, souls throbbing after a grueling shift. Her only desire was a heavy sleep. Upon returning, the interior felt like an absolute oven. The entire household relied on a single cooling mechanism. A deafening, rusted block shoved violently into the ground floor master suite window. It sputtered and violently roared like a failing tractor, completely masking any subtle noises above. The youngest sister frequently crashed on the master couch, simply to survive the humidity. Yet the oldest daughter craved solitude. Enduring the stuffy temperature was entirely worth it for a private sanctuary. Therefore, while her relatives sought refuge in the chilled first-floor air, she ascended the steps solo and slipped into her sleepwear. Her entryway latch had sat useless for ages. To compensate, she jammed a sharp steak knife right into the jamb, a makeshift teenage barricade. She then programmed her clock, crawled beneath the sheets, and drifted off. Below her, the heavy machinery violently hummed. The father, a notoriously heavy slumberer, had immediately checked out for the evening. Mother and youngest daughter passed out on the adjacent sofa. The middle sibling remained off-property watching a neighbor's kid. A deceptive calm blanketed the property, yet a shadow had already breached the perimeter, lurking silently in the pitch-black upper corridor, fixated directly on her entryway. Somewhere between 12 and 2 o'clock in the morning, the household's tiny canine started to aggressively whine. The expecting, typically docile pet went into an absolute frenzy. Its distressed howling sliced right through the overwhelming mechanical roar. The youngest sister shifted on the upholstery, dazed and annoyed. She dragged herself upward, approached the panicked animal, and gently shushed it into submission. Barely conscious, she chalked the erratic behavior up to maternal animal anxiety and collapsed back onto her makeshift mattress. That stood as the solitary disruption anyone recalled. But the terrier sensed pure evil. Pets detect sinister presences that humans completely miss. The frantic creature was desperately signaling a deadly intrusion that nobody deciphered. Darkness dragged forward. The cooling unit vibrated. The occupants remained oblivious. Meanwhile, directly overhead in that upper chamber, a sickening atrocity unfolded. Daylight eventually crept in on July 26, 1989. Somewhere near 9 or 10 o'clock, the teenager's buzzer triggered. It featured an agonizing, persistent wail, the exact type built to rouse a corpse. How does a father blindly ignore his own daughter's corpse? That screeching alarm wouldn't stop, yet John Cox merely climbed the steps, heading for the bathroom. Walking right past her open door, he heard that deafening buzzer. Their shared plumbing meant passing straight through her space. Vintage architecture offered zero boundaries. Catching a glimpse of his teenager in her pajamas during the early rush was totally normal. Usually, it meant nothing. But a sinister chill hung in the air today. Peeking inside, he saw her frozen at a deeply unnatural angle. He caught sight of her missing undergarments beneath that sleep shirt. Mildly weirded out but unsuspecting, he tossed a quilt over her bare legs for privacy before using the toilet. He assumed she was completely passed out. On the ground floor, a creeping dread washed over Beverly. That electronic shrieking had dragged on way past normal. The girl always woke up instantly. She hollered at Felisa to investigate what was holding her sibling up. Her sister trudged upward. Annoyed yet secretly anxious, she shoved the bedroom door wide. Bellowing to wake up, her gaze suddenly locked onto a terrifying stillness. The teenager's frame was frozen, rock solid. Even worse, her flesh glowed an absolutely horrifying, ghastly purplish hue. Some type of garment was twisted viciously around her throat. A blood-curdling shriek ripped out, sending Beverly sprinting upstairs with terrified speed. Taking in the horrific sight of her deceased child, maternal instinct completely short-circuited. In a panic delusion, she prayed her kid had somehow caused this. Trembling uncontrollably, she punched 911 into the receiver. First responders swarmed the property moments later, yet hope had already vanished. She had been deceased since midnight, completely locked in rigor mortis. Medics immediately backed away from what was clearly a homicide. Returning from a childcare gig, Amber was greeted by flashing cruisers, barrier tape, and evidence techs crawling all over her home. Her folks were completely traumatized, while her sister wailed uncontrollably. Up in that bedroom, investigators unraveled a nightmare. These gruesome discoveries would deeply scar Kansas City for the next 31 years. Law enforcement instantly recognized the malicious intent inside that room. The victim had been forcefully choked to death. Coroners backed up the theory, officially ruling it asphyxiation. But the autopsy unveiled an even darker twist, a vicious sexual violation. This completely lacked the vibe of a random hit. It felt calculated and deeply personal. Yet the physical clues presented a maddening puzzle. Wardrobe linens were violently ripped out, forming a messy pile. Outside on the lawn, directly under the siblings' second-floor casement, cops discovered an audio system and a gaming rig resting neatly in the weeds. The intruder obviously tossed them down for a quick getaway, only to ditch the stolen goods during a sudden freakout. Infiltration was clear. The killer scaled the family's rusted garbage hauler, vaulted onto the shed roof, and breached an unsecured upper pane. Forensic specialists scoured the interior for any hidden trace. They recovered foreign stubble, tiny crimson splatters, and vital bodily fluids soaking the mattress. Tragically, 1989 forensics rendered those samples virtually worthless. Detectives were stuck relying on basic plasma typing. Without modern sequencing networks, investigators basically threw darts in the dark. Then, a glaring anomaly emerged. A vintage military hat abandoned nearby. Nobody in the household had ever seen it. She despised that kind of style, so who dropped it? Cops also recovered the kitchen blade she normally jammed into her busted latch. Laying amidst the chaos, the weapon likely served to terrorize the victim into compliance. Yet one specific element drove the task force crazy. Her mattress frame rolled on casters. During a brutal fight, that entire piece of furniture should have slid everywhere without an anchor. Was there actually a second phantom suspect? A monster committing the assault, while a shadowy accomplice stabilized the frame. If so, how did the biological profile single out only one perpetrator? That sinister mystery haunted the precinct for years. Shortly after, the squad locked their sights on the infamous 9th Street Dogs. This ruthless crew dominated the block with break-ins, robberies, and pure brutality. Locals whispered about their exploits. Clear's throat. The entire community was terrified. But investigators uncovered a hidden link. She had been secretly seeing a kid associated with the crew. Absolutely shattered by the homicide, her lover joined the armed forces, fleeing town to escape the trauma. Suddenly, during August of 1989, merely 4 weeks post-tragedy, uniforms rounded up 3 juveniles. One kid actually sat right next to her at Northeast High. The remaining duo were documented accomplices. An informant randomly materialized, dropping incredibly specific intel, details the brass purposefully kept completely classified. This source possessed dark secrets that only the true butcher would understand. A flicker of justice finally sparked for the grieving relatives. A grand jury officially slammed one of those punks with first-degree murder. He rotted behind bars for 8 agonizing months as the state prepared for trial. Then, the entire narrative imploded. The biology completely ruled him out. Smudges pulled from the blade belonged to a ghost. To make matters worse, their star informant abruptly took back every single word. Suddenly, their stories flipped. Silence fell. Lacking physical evidence and witnesses, prosecutors were left holding absolutely nothing. 3 prime suspects hit the streets. Charges vanished. Yet right before breathing free air, somebody finally broke. In interrogation, he confessed to infiltrating the Cox home that dark evening. He detailed scaling an orange pickup, creeping across the roof, and ghosting right through a bedroom pane. He leaked strictly held holdback evidence, like a stereo handle shattering when tossed outside. He even pinpointed the exact drop site, buried beneath specific landscaping outside. Detectives scoured the yard and hit pay dirt exactly there. That detail wasn't just some random lucky guess. The suspect was undeniably present, yet desperately swore his crew only breached the perimeter for a simple heist. They supposedly snagged a gaming console and audio gear, chucking loot outside for easy pickup. He swore they avoided Fawn's space entirely, remaining completely blind to the slaughter happening inside. But just like that, he ripped back his admission, clamming up completely. The narrative vanished. Stripped of statements and biological ties anchoring them to the slaughter, the state's leverage crumbled. The trail froze solid. It became pure psychological hell for her relatives, absolutely certain those intruders breached their home. That admission locked it in. One punk even served 8 months behind bars just for fencing the victim's property. Yet suspicions don't win trials. Time bled from days into decades, leaving the actual butcher roaming the streets without consequence. Her family aggressively refused to let their girl become some dusty archive. Spanning the 1990s and 2000s, her parents morphed into relentless crusaders for justice. They hosted benefits, plastered Kansas City with massive signs, and dangled cash $3,000 in 2000, $10,000 by 2019. Beverly faced endless cameras, sounding resolute yet shattered. Cash talks loud in the underworld, which fueled their desperate faith. Meanwhile, Amber transformed into their own dogged, unofficial detective. She hunted through dark web sleuth boards, unarchived files, and absolutely any digital whisper containing her sister's identity. Spotting chatter, she would aggressively dive in, showing gratitude while probing for any legitimate hardcore leads. By 2018, she dropped highly specific data onto vetted armchair detective boards, leaking classified agency secrets. She revealed that, under normal circumstances, she occupied the exact bedroom those ghosts infiltrated. Except she was watching kids elsewhere that evening. Those monsters either hit the jackpot or they extensively stalked their routines. Regardless, the investigation remained absolutely iced. The reason? Back in 1989, forensic biology was pure sci-fi. When criminal registries finally launched years later, her attacker's profile hit dead ends against countless felons. 0 hits registered. That genetic ghost simply bypassed the entire government mainframe. Her relatives painfully watched ancient mysteries from the 70s and 80s crack wide open via modern ancestry tracing. That identical text snared the Golden State Butcher. So why the delay here? A brutally simple hurdle: lack of cash. The public rarely grasps that cracking dead files takes more than microscopes. It requires massive, hardcore capital. Next-gen biological sequencing drains budgets fast. Barely a few scattered global facilities even possess the capability. Backlogs drag on endlessly. Agencies must ruthlessly triage their dead files. Kansas City brass fed her people an identical line for decades. They claimed they were digging, just broke. Come 2019, her kin completely seized the reins. Crowdfunding became their weapon to buy laboratory time directly. Weeks later, they secured 10 grand, easily covering the complex biological breakdown. Marching into the precinct holding that cash, they aggressively demanded answers. The badge pushed back. Investigator Caldwell laid out a brutal reality check. Taking private capital instantly breeds a corrupt, dual-class legal machine. Privileged bloodlines could essentially buy a fast-tracked homicide investigation. Lower-income victims would rot in purgatory. It felt ethically toxic. The relatives grasped the politics, yet logic hardly numbs a bleeding heart. Felisa dropped the bitter truth. Had this tragedy struck some elite political dynasty, the culprit would be caged overnight. Her cynical read was dead on. But everything shattered by summer 2020. That June, Washington unleashed Operation Legend, a heavily armed federal blitz engineered to crush urban bloodshed nationwide. Honoring a slaughtered local 4-year-old, this aggressive mandate finally delivered exactly what her desperate parents needed. Massive government grants, bureau muscle, elite scientific labs, and ancestry tracing. A newly minted Captain Caldwell spotted his window. He shoved her cold file into the fresh federal pipeline, instantly scoring a green light. Those ancient biological smears preserved since 1989 fluids ripped from her linens were express shipped to Parabon Nano Labs, a global heavyweight in ancestry forensics. Their methodology borders on pure sorcery. Bypassing limited convict registries entirely, this tech weaponizes consumer heritage sites, cross-referencing crime scene biology against millions of everyday citizens searching for their roots. Investigators mapped out sprawling bloodlines, slowly dragging a ghost out from the shadows. An agonizingly slow process, yet utterly effective. Her loved ones held their collective breath for weeks. On November 11th, 2020, 31 years and 4 months post-tragedy, detectives finally made the call. A suspect had been nailed down, but the revelation completely destroyed her loved one's reality. Donald Lee Cox Jr. wasn't some lurking neighborhood creep or anonymous predator. He was her own flesh and blood, her cousin. Just 21 at the time, merely 5 years her senior, this frequent houseguest possessed intimate knowledge of their entire layout. He tracked their daily habits, spotted the unsecured entry points, and calculated exactly when she'd be isolated on the second floor. Weaponizing that intel, he assaulted and choked the life from her. Then, for 31 years, he broke bread at their table. He shared holiday meals, staring her grieving parents right in the face during Thanksgiving feasts. The psychopath even stood at her gravesite, faking tears among the very relatives he had irreparably broken in absolute silence. Relatives sensed a sinister aura around him. Amber eventually disclosed his history of molesting younger cousins, a vile truth hidden away by terror. Yet nobody ever suspected his depravity could escalate into a full-blown slaughter. Justice was robbed from them. The killer passed away in 2006, 14 years before forensics finally exposed his sins. A fatal narcotic binge claimed his life, sparking a secondary probe over questionable details surrounding his demise. Medical examiners stored a fluid vial during his post-mortem, though his status as a casualty kept his genetic code out of the system. The evidence collected dust until 2020, when Parabon's ancestry mapping zeroed in squarely on his hidden profile. Authorities pulled those archived vials, lining them up against the biological traces left at the gruesome crime scene. A 100% confirmation. After 31 years, the true predator was unmasked. Still, unsettling mysteries linger over the narrative. What role did those 3 local teens play the kids who admitted to breaking in and dropping stolen goods outside? Was there a coordinated strike? Did he tag along for the robbery but linger when violence erupted, or did he slip in solo? Perhaps he lurked silently inside the second-floor wardrobe, biding his time as the burglars ransacked the bottom floor? Law enforcement officially shut down the investigation without slapping cuffs on anyone else. Felisa argued further prosecution was pointless. Proving the thieves actively participated in the homicide was virtually impossible without solid proof. The biological markers pointed solely to her cousin. The burglars likely fled into the night, completely oblivious to the evil unfolding upstairs. That truth remains buried. However, a far more chilling anomaly demands attention. Back in 1984, 5 years prior to the tragedy, a 20-year-old local named Tracy Snow vanished without a trace nearby. This missing woman lived right next door and never resurfaced. At 16, could the young predator have orchestrated her disappearance too? Are there undiscovered bodies out there? How many grieving parents are desperately seeking closure for girls swallowed by the abyss? He survived 17 years post-murder, racking up rap sheets for narcotics and larceny while leaving a trail of pure misery. Ultimately, a deadly fix took him out a twist of fate some consider divine retribution, while others view it as cheating justice. At just 16, Fawn Marie had her whole life ahead of her, stashing away diner money for a vehicle and enjoying weekend skating trips. A devout girl brimming with ambition and lifelong friendships, all brutally extinguished on July 26, 1989. For 31 grueling years, her kin battled to keep her memory alive through relentless media pushes, charity drives, and highway signs. Ultimately, those dark secrets clawed their way into the light. Yet the revelation was agonizingly toxic. The attacker was a trusted relative sworn to safeguard her. Captain Ben Caldwell perfectly captured the horror. The community was deeply scarred, shattered by the reality of a defenseless kid butchered within her most sacred, secure sanctuary. Her tragic legacy serves as a stark reminder of modern investigative brilliance, clashing against the incredibly precarious nature of closure. Had advanced DNA profiling not existed, this phantom killer would have remained nameless, leaving a devastating permanent void for her loved ones. 3 chilling truths echo from her fate. Monsters aren't always shadowy drifters. Sometimes they're grinning across the dining room asking for seconds. A postponed reckoning doesn't erase accountability. Modern tech possesses the eerie power to make the dead speak, no matter how much time passes. Furthermore, the absolute resilience of relatives who relentlessly demand answers, decade after decade, embodies the purest form of heroism. She ought to be 51 right now, hitting life's milestones, building a career, raising kids, and sharing golden years with her siblings. Tragically, she remains trapped at 16, forever memorialized. Back in 1989, she unknowingly secured a mute observer biological evidence waiting to testify. By 2020, forensic breakthroughs finally translated that testimony. An ancient photograph still shows that rusty dumpster idling directly under her sill. That exact pane of glass left unlatched, a lethal vulnerability disguised as a way to catch the evening air. A supposed sanctuary of familial loyalty mutated into a literal stepping stone for ultimate treachery. With the mystery unraveled, that illusion of safety is permanently shattered. That vehicle transcends being a mere murder weapon now. It became the undeniable smoking gun that exposed the dark reality. That unlatched window represents far more than a fatal oversight. It is a chilling warning that the deadliest monsters already live beneath your roof. For those still watching, we appreciate you bearing witness to Fawn's tragic narrative. Unraveling these grim mysteries is grueling, but vital. The fallen demand our memory, and their grieving relatives demand a voice. Hit subscribe to join our relentless pursuit of unsolved atrocities, handled with utmost reverence. Drop your theories and lingering suspicions below. Pass this along to anyone who understands that delayed accountability is still worth fighting for. Never forget Fawn Marie Cox, a beloved daughter, sibling, and confidant robbed of her future. Through her family's relentless crusade, her harrowing nightmare finally reached a definitive conclusion. Sleep peacefully, Fawn. Your brutal crusade is finally over. The tragic story of Fawn Marie Cox is a visceral reminder that the blueprint of a perfect life can be shattered in an instant by the very people sworn to protect it. This case serves as a haunting educational lesson in the power of intuition, that gut-wrenching instinct whispering of danger long before a crime is committed. We must learn that silence in the face of predatory behavior is never a sanctuary. It is a lethal trap that allows monsters to hide behind the mask of suburban normalcy. Fawn's legacy also offers a revolutionary truth about our digital and biological identity. Even after 31 years, the smallest mute observer, a fragment of DNA, possessed the eerie power to testify when the living could not. Her family's relentless crusade embodies the purest form of heroism, proving that delayed accountability is a battle always worth fighting. Let this be a warning to stay vigilant. The deadliest vulnerabilities are often the ones we overlook, like an unlatched window meant for a breeze that instead invites a predator. We must honor Fawn by refusing to let the truth remain buried, ensuring that even the most calculated genetic ghosts are eventually dragged into the light.